New York City in the 19th century was a place of remarkable contrasts. Grand mansions stood not far from crumbling slums. Horse-drawn carriages rolled past barefoot street urchins. Merchant wealth expanded alongside desperate poverty. It was the century where New York became not just a city, but the city, the beating heart of American ambition. But in those dark alleys, far from the sparkling avenues of the wealthy, something else was growing: gangs. Fierce, local, street-born groups that ruled neighborhoods by violence, loyalty, and sheer force of desperation. These were more than thugs. They were folk legends of the underworld. They shaped politics, terrified citizens, and turned neighborhoods like the infamous Five Points into battlefields. From Irish immigrant boys organizing in gin houses to clashes that required the National Guard to suppress, the gangs of 19th century New York became part of the city's DNA. Tonight, let's step back into those smoke-filled streets, glimpse the faces of notorious brawlers like Hellcat Maggie and Bill the Butcher, and trace the evolution of New York gangs from ragtag toughs to the predecessors of organized crime. In the early 1820s, Five Points emerged as New York's most notorious slum. Once a pond filled in with shoddy construction, it had collapsed into overcrowded tenements, muddy alleys, and chaotic saloons. It became home largely to poor Irish immigrants and free Black Americans, people chased by famine, poverty, or discrimination into one of the harshest neighborhoods in the world. Here, in a grocery store run by a woman named Rosanna Piers, lurked the beginnings of the 40 Thieves. Piers sold vegetables up front, but in the back, she poured gin strong enough to numb most sorrows. That back room became the meeting ground of New York's first formally organized gang. Mostly young Irish immigrants, the 40 Thieves began as pickpockets, hustlers, and petty criminals. By the mid-1820s, they'd organized themselves into an early underworld fraternity, with Edward Coleman, an Irish tough, as their leader. Legend says Coleman required members to deliver regular tributes of stolen goods or risk expulsion. The 40 Thieves didn't stop there. They recruited boys into a subgroup known as the Little 40 Thieves, training children as pickpockets and lookouts. Imagine Dickens' Oliver Twist, but in the crowded, dangerous stew of Manhattan's Five Points. The gang terrified locals so badly that even newspapers in faraway Vermont warned of the 5 Points. Outrageous crimes, robberies, and beatings became headline stories. In a grim twist, Coleman himself murdered his wife during a drunken rage in 1838, becoming the first man hanged at the notorious Tombs prison. His execution only deepened 5 Points' reputation as a hive of crime. By the 1840s, the landscape grew fiercer. Irish immigrants fleeing famine poured into New York, fueling both gang growth and fierce hostilities. Neighborhoods carved lines of tribal identity. And soon, rival banners rose, most famously the Dead Rabbits and the Bowery Boys. The Dead Rabbits, Irish toughs of 5 Points, got their name, depending on which tale you believe, either from a dead rabbit carcass hurled into one of their meeting halls, or from Irish slang for rowdy youths. They allegedly carried an actual rabbit impaled on a stick into fights, both grotesque symbol and war banner. Their enemies, the Bowery Boys, were native-born Americans often linked to nativist politics. Volunteer firemen by day, gang fighters by night. They strutted in distinctive uniforms, red flannel shirts, stovepipe hats, boots tucked into trousers. To many, they embodied native pride and fierce hostility towards Irish immigrants. Politics bled into violence. The Bowery Boys supported anti-immigrant parties, while the Irish gangs backed Tammany Hall Democrats who courted immigrant voters. Gang battles regularly broke out, sometimes as political intimidation, sometimes just for blood. Their most infamous clash came in July 1857, erupting into a 48-hour melee known as the Dead Rabbits riot. Thousands fought with clubs, paving stones, knives, and pistols. Police forces, already divided by politics, were overwhelmed. Rooftops rained bricks onto officers below, barricades went up, and the streets ran with blood. Only when the National Guard marched in with bayonets fixed did the riots dissolve. Dozens died, scores were maimed, and New York realized its gangs had become urban armies. The gangs weren't only street brawlers. They became entangled with politics, policing, and even public image. Tammany Hall relied on Irish gangs to intimidate rivals at polling stations, ensuring immigrant votes went their way. In return, political allies and bought-off police captains gave gangs leeway to operate. Gang leaders doubled as political organizers, and election days often became bloodied parades of intimidation. And gangs craved a twisted honor. After the Dead Rabbits riot, the gang paid to publish a letter in the New York Times claiming they weren't thieves at all, merely fighters defending their honor. Even criminals wanted decent branding, it seems. Meanwhile, individuals stood out with frightening theatrics. Women like Hellcat Maggie, who filed her teeth into points and wore brass claws in barroom brawls. Or Dandy John Dolan, notorious for boots rigged with hidden blades. Some gangs even kept price lists for services. $2 to punch a nose, $15 to chew off an ear, $100 to do the big job. Violence wasn't random, it was marketed. After the Civil War, New York's gangs didn't vanish, they evolved. The riots of the 1870s-80s rose to dominate Lower Manhattan. Their trademark whistle, "Yo-yo," gave them a name and became street slang for danger. The riots were more structured, a bridge between chaotic street gangs and organized crime. They ran dance halls and saloons, shook down shopkeepers, collected protection money, and rented their muscle to crooked politicians. At night, they robbed, brawled, and killed. Individual members grew infamous for shocking brutality. John Dolan with his eye-gouging tool. Piker Ryan supposedly carrying a menu for prices for beatings and murders. By the 1880s, the riots were so feared that entire districts were virtually off-limits to regular citizens. Their downfall came in 1884 when Danny Driscoll was executed for murdering a woman. Public disgust allowed police to finally crush the riots, scattering their remnants. Of course, new gangs soon filled the void. Life in Five Points and Hell's Kitchen slums gave gangs both purpose and identity. Young men, often teenagers, grew up in overcrowded, filthy tenements. Work was scarce. Discrimination for Irish, Italian, and Jewish immigrants meant opportunities were limited. Gang life offered power, camaraderie, and income, even if it was violent, short-lived, and brutal. Headquarters were usually saloons doubling as gang halls. There, leaders gave orders, loot was divided, and fights were planned. Culture mattered. Gangs dressed stylishly or carried trademark weapons. Nicknames like Smoke Morrissey or Bill the Butcher gave them legendary presence. To many slum dwellers, gangs even looked like neighborhood defenders. They fought against rival ethnic groups or against outsiders. And while they terrified as often as they protected, they represented a dark form of belonging in a city that gave them none. By the 1890s, gangs like Paul Kelly's Five Points Gang and Monk Eastman's Jewish-dominated crew transformed New York's underworld into something new. Large, army-sized criminal organizations. Kelly recruited more than 1,500 members, mixing Irish and Italian youths, focusing not just on brawling, but on maintaining vice rings, brothels, and gambling dens. His rival, Monk Eastman, built an equally huge force of Jewish gangsters.
When their turf conflicts exploded, New York saw shootouts of a scale never witnessed before. Gunfights under the elevated railway. Whole avenues turned into battlegrounds. This was the dawn of modern, organized crime. In their ranks, young toughs like Al Capone and Luciano first cut their teeth before carrying gangland traditions into the 20th century. The story of New York's 19th century gangs is one of poverty turned into power, of chaos shaping order, of city streets soaked in both fear and folklore. They began as slum kids stealing loaves of bread and ended as organized criminals whose descendants shaped America's underworld. These gangs forced New York to modernize its police force and grapple with the realities of immigration, class tension, and corruption.
Close your eyes and imagine dusk in old Japan. The mountain ridges draped in mist, torii gates standing as silent thresholds, temples and shrines glowing with soft lantern light. The evening air is alive, not just with the chirp of crickets, the trickle of streams, and the scent of pine resin, but with something unseen. In the traditional Shinto view, countless spirits, or kami, inhabit this world. There is an old expression that says there are 8 million of them, so many that every mountain, every river, every breeze, every stone might conceal a presence, unseen yet present. Some of these spirits are benevolent, comforting protectors. Others are capricious tricksters, and a few are wrathful beings, quick to curse when neglected. This is not a horror story, not a ghost tale meant just to frighten. Tonight, we wander in reverence as well as curiosity. For Shinto and its understanding of spirits teaches not of a cosmic battle of good versus absolute evil, but of balance, moods, and harmony. Even the fiercest kami, while destructive one moment, may protect the next when properly respected. Demonology in Shinto, if we call it that, is not about eternal foes. It is a deep catalog of imbalance and the rituals of restoration. And as the night deepens, we will drift gently through these stories, meeting gods who rage, ghosts who linger, animals that trick, artifacts that awaken, and demons who are not always what they seem. So breathe slow, unclench your jaw, and let us begin our wandering through Shinto's world of spirits and demons. Kami and the blurred line of gods and demons. The starting point in Shinto belief is the kami, the spirits, forces, or presences that permeate existence. Western translators sometimes simplify this as gods or even spirits, but really the concept is broader. A kami might be as grand as the sun itself or as local as the ancient tree at the edge of your village. It might be the protective soul of an ancestor or a presence within a waterfall, a mountain, a boulder shining strangely in the sunlight. A Shinto proverb counts 8 million kami, which really means an endless multitude. Importantly, they are not divided strictly into good or evil. Each kami has aspects. Shrines describe these as 2 mitama, or souls. One, the Nigi mitama, is gentle, harmonious, and nurturing. The other, the Ara mitama, is rough, fierce, even destructive. The same deity may bless harvests one season and unleash storms the next. Where Western theology often posits a devil, an external adversary of God and humankind, Shinto does not. Misfortune stems either from neglected kami or from restless, impure spirits. Not a grand moral villain, but imbalance. To offend a kami, to leave its shrine untended, or to pollute sacred space might awaken its rough side. A normally guardian presence might seem demonic in its rage. Thus, demonology in Japan is less about damned forces of eternal evil than it is about recognizing when a kami or spirit has turned restless and how to pacify it. Impurity, pollution, and the seeds of demons. Another lens Shinto uses is that of purity versus defilement.
The word kigare refers to impurity that attracts trouble. Death, blood, disease, decay, all were seen as pollutants that could breed calamity or draw in wandering spirits. A traumatic death could turn a soul restless, polluted with rage, lingering as a ghost later thought of as demonic. Likewise, human misdeeds or violations of natural order, called tsumi, created spiritual stains that spread suffering through communities unless cleansed. Yet, impurity was never permanent. Humanity was seen as naturally pure beneath the stains. That is why Shinto places such emphasis on purification rituals. Washing hands and rinsing mouths at a shrine basin. Sprinkling salt at a doorway. Seasonal festivals that sweep whole towns in symbolic cleansing. At the grand level, twice every year, all of Japan still observes Oharai, the Great Purification, when priests chant away the grime of sins and misfortunes of the last 6 months, reciting the names of disasters, diseases, and demonic influences to be cast away with paper dolls or reed wreaths. Thus, demons, or what appear as demons, are framed not as eternal evil, but as what happens when impurity festers. And the antidote is not damnation or destruction, but cleansing, pacification, and restoration of harmony. Yomi and the first demonic myths. Like every culture, Japan asked, what lies beyond death? The earliest myths recorded in the Kojiki 712 and Nihon Shoki 720 tell of Yomi, the shadowy land of the dead. Here we first encounter scenes that blur divinity with horror. The creator pair Izanagi and Izanami formed the islands of Japan. But when Izanami died giving birth to the fire god, she descended into Yomi. Grief-stricken, Izanagi sought to retrieve her. He was warned not to look upon her, for she had eaten the food of the underworld. Yet he lit a torch and saw a decaying corpse crawling with maggots, birthing thunder demons from her body. Furious at being seen, Izanami unleashed the Hag of Yomi, a furious female demon, and hordes of underworld spirits to chase him. Izanagi fled and blocked the cavern with a boulder. From within, his wife's voice cursed him, vowing to claim 1,000 lives every day. Izanagi answered that 1,500 would be born daily, setting the balance of mortality. This primal myth gave Japanese religion its first demon archetypes: the wrathful woman wronged, the hag of shadow, the polluted corpse birthing calamity. And it introduced the idea that even gods could become terrifying when angered. Monsters in the myths, Orochi and beyond. Other early tales gave monster shapes to chaos. The storm god Susumu, cast down for his wild ways, wandered to find a weeping family. They explained that the serpent Orochi, vast as 8 valleys, returned each year to devour a daughter. 7 had been eaten, 1 remained. Susanoo brewed 8 vats of potent sake. The 8 heads drank greedily, fell drunk. The god drew his sword and hacked the serpent apart. From its belly he pulled a divine blade, the Kusanagi sword, later one of Japan's imperial regalia. The story reads as a classic dragon slayer myth, like Hercules or St. George, but with Shinto twists. Susanoo himself was turbulent, hardly saintly. His own fury was feared, yet his violent side slew worse violence. Again the blurry line, god and demon shades of the same coin. And Orochi, was it a demon or simply the embodiment of flood storms made monstrous? Spirit of the wronged, Onryo in the Heian court. By the Heian era, 794 to 1185, Japan's aristocratic capital Kyoto was haunted, not just by political intrigue, but by restless ghosts called Onryo, vengeful spirits of those wronged in life. Earthquakes, plagues, lightning, sudden deaths, all were blamed on such ghosts. The spirit of Prince Sawara, unjustly accused, starved in exile. Soon after, storms and epidemics struck. Officials panicked, posthumously pardoned him, even made him emperor in title, and enshrined his spirit to pacify the wrath. Another famous case, Sugawara no Michizane, ousted scholar, died bitter. Soon lightning destroyed imperial halls, enemies fell ill, even emperors lost heirs. Possessed mediums declared Michizane had become a thunder god raging. So shrines were built, his honor restored, and in time he was worshipped as Tenjin, deity of scholarship. Students today still pray at his shrines for exam success, forgetting, or maybe remembering, how he began as a demon of vengeance. Here lies Shinto demonology at work, not banishment, but appeasement, reconciliation with injustice by elevating the furious as honored protectors. Oni, the ogres of folklore. Ask a Japanese child to draw a demon, and likely they sketch an Oni, a horned ogre, skin red or blue, wild hair, and a club of iron. Oni has an image crystallized over centuries, blending Chinese underworld demons, Buddhist hell guardians, and native chaos spirits. By medieval times, paintings and plays showed them vividly, muscle-bound, tiger-skin loincloths, fangs flashing. They embodied pestilence, famine, raids from bandits, and also raw human passion. Plays portrayed jealous women transforming into Oni-babas, demon hags of vengeance. Yet not all Oni were cast as irredeemable devils. Some legends told of Oni converts who guarded temples and penance, more loyal in righteousness than men. By the Edo period, Oni appeared across art and satire. Netsuke figurines mocked them, kabuki actors donned their masks. They terrified but also amused, humor robbing their grip. To this day, Setsubun Festival each February drives them away. Families casting roasted beans at a masked relative shouting, "Oni wa soto, fuku wa uchi," demons out, fortune in. Shinto's way of seasonal cleansing turned grotesque monsters into household jesters ritualized out the door. Yokai, the wide world of strange beings. Beyond Oni sprawls an entire menagerie, the yokai, strange apparitions, tricksters, monsters half feared and half loved. A tengu with long nose, sweeping wings, once feared for luring monks astray, later respected as stern mountain guardians. A fox or kitsune, slinking at shrine gates, messenger of Inari, benevolent fox of rice, as well as playful trickster who beguiled peasants with illusions of women in the twilight. A tanuki, raccoon dog, bumbling into pranks, folding laughter into folklore. And the fragile, eerie yurei, ghosts with pale faces, long hanging hair, white funeral gowns, still haunting no plays and modern horror films alike. Some wander with sorrow, some with frenzy. All hover on the border between kami appeasement and popular storytelling. Even old objects, cracked umbrellas, discarded kettles, were said to sprout spirits as tsukumogami. Household items abandoned carelessly at 100 years gained eyes, limbs, and anger, marching at night for mischievous revenge. Today, ceramic tanuki statues peer outside izakayas for good luck. Even once fearsome yokai have been soothed into mascots. Rituals, charms, and cleansing. Demonology is not separate in Shinto, it is woven into ritual life. Shrines provide a fuda, paper talismans inscribed with kami's power to protect homes. Families hang ropes of straw, shimenawa, around gates, boundaries no impure spirits can cross. Priests perform rites of blessing and expulsion. Mediums known as miko may dance in trance to soothe or retrieve afflicted souls. Seasonal festivals are equally exorcistic. In Akita, the Namahage rite sees costumed ogres stomping through households on New Year's Eve, warning lazy children and purifying families by mock fear. In Kyoto, Gion Festival honors Susanoo, transformed from stormy wrath to protector against plague. Exorcism in Japan is rarely about fighting demons in cosmic war. It is about negotiation, offering, balance, sometimes with serious liturgy, sometimes with a playful laugh. The underlying idea is consistent. Spirits are around us, unseen threads woven through mountains, kitchens, markets, and tombs. When misfortune strikes, perhaps an oni is at the door, or perhaps only an impurity clings. You purify, appease, banish, or even laugh at it away. Each ritual, each bean cast towards an oni mask, each prayer at a kamidana keeps life and chaos balanced. The dreams of spirits. Tonight, you have walked among the kami and the oni, the fox spirits and angry ghosts, the laughing raccoon dogs and sorrowful pale souls. You have seen that in Shinto worldview, demons are not abstract devils to be fought for eternity, but troubled forces within a cosmos alive with spirits. They are imbalance, impurity, grief, rage, but also transformation and reconciliation. Japanese demonology teaches that fear can be appeased, wrongs can be respected into guardianship, and that laughter too has power, turning the demon into a festival mask chased away with beans. So close your eyes now and let the lanterns of the shrine fade into the mist of your dreams. For demons have been expelled for tonight, fortunes welcomed in, and in the soft hush of slumber, balance restored.